So for today, the key topic is about a certain kind of management simulations, but I will also explain our approach and our spectrum of simulations that we typically work with. I want to get started and talk about simulations and why it is a good idea and where do they come from, what kind of simulations we're talking about. I do want to give a demo today and walking you through one of the simulations that is very popular in our workshops with clients in enterprises and organizations and NGOs, even in the public sector. And then we will talk about some examples of workshops and how they fit to different learning objectives or business objectives, organizational objectives. I'll speak a little bit about the science and the experience behind these workshops, also the experience that we have made in working with clients. And then I will close out with some guidance and recommendations how you can benefit from management simulation workshops. Well, I guess we have all been there in the sandbox playing with our toys. And if you really think about this, this is also some very early kind of simulation where we worked with instruments to create something and maybe to tear it down in the next moment and build something new again. But the next level, probably most of you have played also the game of Monopoly. You could think about that this game is also some kind of simulation about the accumulation of wealth and the ripple effects that it might create on the participants. A more sophisticated version is here a train simulation. I like this particular image because who would want to step into a train and knowing that the train guide has not been trained properly on running such a high-speed vehicle on a high-speed trajectory, for example. And the same is true also in aviation. Simulators have been used for a long time already to train pilots and also to train specific situations. For example, when you come into turbulences or other things that might happen. And this is an important way to learn, experience, and build capabilities. It is really about doing something today and fast forwarding into the future and trying out different experiments without having the risk, the cost of, doing that in a, for example, on a commercial flight or in a real situation with an airplane. But we are also moving more from simple game toys to really high impact instruments for deeper learning and deeper insight. And when I'm saying deep learning, I mean about building capabilities. And you could think about simulations of a great way to accelerate learning, especially for those who come to the workforce and do not have the years-long experience that, for example, some more experienced members in the organization have. But it's also a great way for team learning. So when the team is interacting in these situations, you can also surface new insights. I like this particular simulation, which was developed as a partnership between our friends at Climate Interactive and the MIT Sloan School of Management. That's where the home of system dynamics modeling is. I'm a big fan of system dynamics modeling. I was trained on this. First, I got into this in probably around the year 2000 when I faced increasing complex challenges and dynamic implications in my work as a young manager. I was working at Microsoft Corporation at the time, and I realized that little changes can have big effects on everything from customer base to the employee workforce and, of course, profitability. Now, this particular simulation is really high-end because it's fairly interactive. This is about a climate change simulation, so you can play here with the different levers and explore what-if scenarios. So, for example, what if we invest more or less in renewables, if we invest more or less in coal, oil, if we drive energy efficiency? It's a very feedback-rich simulation. It's almost too complex to comprehend in one go, so you really need to dive into this. What I also like about this is it can be used for workshop facilitation, and it's also grounded in scientific evidence. So the models that we can use in the simulation are calibrated to the latest data and also scientific insights and advancements. But climate, as we probably all agree, is a fairly complex topic. Usually on a day-to-day basis, we have to deal with very practical things. Here's an example, and this is a simulation I also want to demo in a few moments, so you get a better feel of what that looks like and what you can do with this. We've put together this very simple marketing dynamics simulation to explore the adoption of innovation or of change or products, for example. Just today and in the last few days, I had several conversations about this. One company was looking into how do we capture a market? Are we too late in the market? How can we unlock a market, for example? Another company was looking at different phases of their installed base and what the impacts might be if we accelerate the adoption or if people upgrade or downgrade their pricing packages, etc. But it all comes down to a very core archetype, what we typically call an archetype. And when I say archetype, I mean a feedback structure of a system. A system can be a business system, a social system. And here in this case, we are looking at a system which has potential adopters, and through the process, through the flow of adopting a solution or adopting a product, they become users or adopters of the innovation or change. The interesting part that we want to look at typically in management simulations is change over time. So in this particular simulation, we have developed a simple dashboard with some key indicators. So you see here the adoption fraction. Basically, you could also say the market share. But obviously, when we talk about change within the enterprise, we're not talking about necessarily about market share. But for example, if you want the organization to adopt a new thing, for example, AI tools, no? The question is, how quickly does this process evolve over time? What is our flow rate? When we, as system dynamicists, when we say rate, we basically means things per time step. So here in this case, for example, customers per month or adopters per week, etc. And we can also take a look at how does our base of adopters evolve and how does the remaining market decline over time. And this is important decision if we want to make an informed decision about, are we still early enough? Are we too late in this market? What is the structure of the market, etc. And we can also take a look at how the adoption process flows over time over the different channels. So I want to switch over to give you a quick walkthrough of such a simulation, because this is a simulation that we use in popular workshops. In general, it is about diffusion and adoption of innovation. Diffusion meaning diffusion in a social system like an enterprise, a business, a market, an industry, etc. It can be applied in exploring dynamic topics for change management, for product innovation and some key concepts which want to be adapted. And the learning objectives are really to discover the complexities and the dynamics which are unfolding, because the system structure and the feedback structure of the system is determining the behavior, and it depends on how we interact and how we intervene or design the system structure. This determines how the behavior is unfolding over time. So let's switch over to take a brief look at the simulation. This is the other simulation which I just mentioned, which will be a topic for a future webinar. But here is the marketing dynamics simulation. We typically start with a little description, and we show what is the feedback structure of the system that we are looking at. A little bit of interesting fact here is that when we start, for example, without this information about this structure, and by structure we mean feedback loops, the stocks, the flows, the delays, etc., we have all different ideas. We call this mental models of what is the fabric of the social system, what is the fabric of the target market that we are looking at, how far along are we. Everybody has a different idea, different mental model. And then in the next step, we typically explain, okay, here's the underlying structure that informs already our systemic mindset, so to speak, where there might be opportunities or leverage points. Now, we typically start with the decision panel here. And let's say, for example, we want to explore a system where we have a fairly good sales rate of maybe we are selling to 1,000 customers per month, and we call this scenario, for example, sales only. Now, this particular simulation is set up in a way that it's doing a simulation over the entire time horizon of the simulation. We also work with step-by-step simulations, which serve a different purpose. I'll come to that in a minute. But so now that we have made our choices here, we save and simulate, and we are taken to our screen. Here we have now 2 simulations, so I just entered this simulation run. And you can see, even if we have a fairly strong sales rate, our market share is barely moving. So after 60 months, we have just captured 6 percentage points of the market. That's not very useful. So let's try something different. Let's say we have a little bit lower sales rate. Let's say we sell to, let's maybe say 200 customers per time step. And this might be a more realistic scenario. And I just will, for example, play with this concept here of word of mouth. What is important for that is we need to have some initial contacts already so that word of mouth can unfold. So let's say, for example, we also have 10 contacts, which are typically coming into our installed base through direct sales. And these talk to 10 customers on average per time period. So for example, per month or per week. And we call this word of mouth adoption, and see what that is doing to our innovation process here. Now we have a new scenario available, and you can see this is quite a different scenario. And here we are looking, this is exactly the cockpit, so to speak, which I was explaining. Here we look at the market share, the acquisition rate. Rate in our lingo here would be customers per month, and also the different channels. And it's very obvious that word of mouth is contributing quite a lot. Now, you also see some behavior evolving over here, and this is quite interesting and important, because here we can see how an S-shaped growth curve is emerging as a behavior from the system. So this is based on the feedback loops that are in the system, so the reinforcing feedback loops which drive the accelerating growth, and balancing feedback loops which turn out to be here dampening the system or balancing the system, as we say. So there's much more to say about this, but I just wanted to give you a general feeling. We can also compare our runs here. And here you can see what our market share is. And obviously, with very powerful feedback loops like word of mouth, we can move much faster. And this is essential for example, for a SaaS company who has just launched a new product. They want to move fast. They want to capture as many customers before their competitors are stepping in. All right, so going back, the way we apply this typically, of course, you can play with the simulation like this, but the first question we typically get is, okay, what do I have to do? What can I do with this? And this kind of simulation, we call it the micro-learning environment or micro-world, so to speak. They can be used, for example, in a very short team play sessions. And this can be done within an hour, for example. If you want to make this part of a team meeting or a retreat, etc., as an online meeting, typically the way I suggest to go through this is to go through a brief introduction of what we're looking at, what's the challenge here, play a first round. Step 3 is to come back from our different groups, review the results that we have and the insights and questions. Typically that creates a lot of headaches and aha moments where people realize, okay, it's not that easy, but it's kind of interesting how the system is behaving. Now, how can I optimize this? And that's where we play the next round. And then after that, we do a debrief. Within this very simplified session, we're not only able to surface the dynamic behavior of such simulations of these micro worlds, if you want, but we also interacting with the model. So we are building capabilities, and more importantly, we are surfacing our assumption how the world works, our mental models. No? And these kind of simulations, or this particular one, can be, of course, extended if you want to make this part of a learning curriculum, but it's also suitable for many situations: change management, customer success, and supporting an increasing customer base, marketing dynamics, sales and business development. So how do we grow our addressable markets, for example, HR recruiting, HR change initiatives, and many, many more. There is a wealth of literature available from the scientific community and also practitioners. Some highlights I want to mention here: that through the use of simulations compared to other methods, people can learn faster, so they can acquire the skills faster. And this is a great way also to give a good head start and boost the learning, for example, of next generation team members or leaders in the organization. It's really an experience accelerator. Teams who are using simulation-based training also showed an improvement in their judgment and decision accuracy. Okay, so once we understand the structure and how a system is behaving, we can tell already how this is going to evolve. And I can say from my experience, being trained as a system dynamics modeler, system dynamicist, after I went through this training, and sometimes very rigorous training from my teachers, I started to read the news differently. And this certainly makes a big impact on our basically daily life, but also what we do in organizations. But we can see other impacts in terms of let's say, the error rate that we have in things. There's one particular simulation which I like a lot, which is about project dynamics. That's where many teams also get an insight about how they plan, manage, and optimize their projects, for example. So there's much more to say about that. There's a lot of research still going on. What really is interesting is when people not only look at the models, but they start interacting with the models, and maybe at the the higher end of the spectrum, also to build models together, what we call the group model building process or group modeling process, which I like a lot. It's a great way to build your digital twin, for example, of your SaaS business, of your marketing campaigns, of your recruitment efforts, and so on. Now, when we step back for a moment, we could be three people like these people here on the imaginary road in the landscape somewhere, and everybody has a different idea, maybe expectation. An expectation is an anticipated belief or outcome, what might actually happen if we go down this road. One person might say, oh, we kind of the pessimist view, we will enter a cliff and then we will all die because we fall down. Another person might think, oh, this might lead us to the promised land and we can sit on the beach and enjoy our cocktails. And another person might say, well, behind this curve on the horizon is just another curve, so we will just keep going. And this is very typical because we have different mental models. But a mental model is actually quite a little bit different because it is our own personal belief and a representation of how we believe the world actually works. So this group, maybe they come at a stop somewhere and want to drink coffee, and one person might think, okay, there's some kind of sophisticated mechanics in this coffee machine. Another person might think, oh, there's a person sitting behind there pouring the water into the instant coffee, stirring it, and giving us the cup. In some cities, I have actually seen it that way. It just looks like an automated booth or a vending machine, but there is actually a person serving the hot beverage, for example. And the other person might think about a direct connection to a coffee producing business or a factory. So these are all different models, and maybe they're all right. They all have some merit. But the question is, when we are in this decision-making situation and we want to evolve our business, how we work, the products, and improve and optimize, we need to surface our mental models and come to an informed decision how we are moving forward. So what are the interaction points? How do we allocate resources? What is our timing? And so on. And that's where I think simulation games can play a great role, because they bring this to the surface, they foster teamwork, and they help us to make decisions. Now, generally speaking, there are two kind of models in two big categories. One is the scenario play, which I just demonstrated. So that model or that simulation falls in that category. You press a button and then you change basically it plays out over the time horizon. In our scenario, it was 60 months, so 5 years. It's quite a long time in today's world. And you basically can rerun the simulation. And that's, of course, a key benefit. You can't do that in reality. So once you have, let's say, kicked off your project, it's basically in motion. Oftentimes you cannot go back, most of the time, cannot go back and say, okay, let's undo everything and try something new. You're living in a world with finite resources and constraints, such as budget constraints, schedule constraints, political frameworks, and whatever. Another category would be step-by-step simulation. So what we do here is we basically play the first step. Let's say we play the first round for a few months or weeks in model time, so to speak. And then we come back, take a look and review what happens. And then we adjust our assumptions. So it's a stepwise adjustment of our decisions. And we basically move forward and adjust our decisions as we get more information and information feedback from our model. This is something really good. Both models are very useful for different purposes. So again, here is the model that we just looked at, where you can produce different scenarios. I typically refer to these as performance scenarios over time. So here we have a representation of different market shares over the time horizon of 5 years or 60 months. And here's another a screenshot from a simulation which we use for recruitment activities, recruitment marketing, for example, and making decisions about hiring, training, and promotion of people in the workforce. It's a very simple model with 3 cohorts. We call them the trainees, the juniors or junior experts, and the senior experts. And you have to make decisions. What I often like to do is let people play around, and then we expose a challenge. For example, that a competitor is opening a shop next door and they're pulling some of your experts. No? And then, of course, you're triggering the system to go into some kind of unfavorable dynamics or crisis, and then the players have to act. And then we can use that in, let's say, different breakout groups and compare what are the strategies that the groups have chosen, why have they chosen it, etc. And this is a great way for experiential learning and also surfacing our assumptions about this. Now, there are different types, like individual simulations, which you can run by yourself or in small groups. I like this a lot. We can facilitate multiplayer games where people play with or against each other and competing for resources or market share, for example. I'm also teaching a university course where I develop a case study. So we go over several workshops, basically, from understanding the core concepts, sometimes to produce a certain outcome. For example, a digital twin or dashboard. For example, dashboards are very popular because that's also what the students can use or the learners can use in their business. And in some cases, we also do group model building if we want to understand a certain scenario, for example. So how might our strategy and our key initiatives play out over time? And once we have created the quote-unquote digital twin, we can play with that at literally no cost. No? So we can run as many simulations as we typically want. Digital twin can be a big or small word, depending on how you look at it. I like to refer to digital twins as something that you can put together fairly quickly and that you can change over time. We're not talking about monolithic structures that you build, and once you have built it, it's already outdated. No? So it should serve you over time, and you should be able to tweak it over time. Now, simulation areas are manifold. So basically, we can take a look at the core business functions in business and organizations, everything from marketing, sales, HR to supply chain management. There's a great simulation game, which is called the Beer Game. It's probably it's probably the oldest simulation games based on system dynamics models, which was spearheaded by the MIT group under the leadership of J. Wright Forrester. It's a very popular game. It also exists as a board game, which you can play on tables. Really, really fun to work with. And then we can take a look at different challenges, such as adoption of innovation, customer-based growth or customer-based profitability, disaster recovery or recall scenarios, and also special topics such as better understanding our marketing funnel and how to allocate resources, how to grow a SaaS business, project management simulations to figure out how can we better plan, implement, and deliver, for example, service projects for our clients, and many, many more areas. So what I would recommend is that you start leveraging dynamic simulation games for enabling shared learning in the organization. in teams, and sometimes maybe even across organizational boundaries, or involving your ecosystem partners, for example, if you want to understand how can we, for example, improve our supply chain and make it more resilient. Then, of course, the Holy Grail is into transferring the insights into strategy, so that we're not only having a fun time playing this, but also we're doing something with this. We're informing our strategy, we're informing our data-driven experiments, we try something out, see how it plays out in the real world, and then we come back again. So this is kind of part of what we often refer to as the double loop learning process. And then once we figure out a recipe that's working, we want to standardize it with the processes, procedures, tools, reports that we have in the organization. In many projects, I also use simulations and game simulations to develop dashboards. No? And the typical feedback is a big aha moment where people realize, now I understand how things flow through our enterprise and why upstream seemingly meaningless changes can have an enormous ripple effect downstream. So, for example, if your deal size and deal frequency changes upstream, you definitely will have an impact downstream when you deliver products or solutions or services. So that can be explored and figured out. I would recommend using a mix of micro-learning opportunities and maybe in-depth workshops where you are diving deeper in the topic. I think also a combination of game playing and information or little lectures, if you want, is useful in order to transfer knowledge and get a different view on our business and social systems that we live in and work in. And of course, I would encourage you to play more and enjoy the game playing. Now, if you would like to have some ideas or explore how this could be useful for your organization, we will be happy to help. So scan the QR code and get in touch with us. We can deliver management simulation, facilitated workshops from long to short workshops. We also develop custom models in combination often with dashboards that then are implemented typically by the IT teams and analysts in the organization. And also we're using a lot of digital twins for scenario planning and de-risking organizations. There's also a website which talks about this, so the link is here. We will put that in the show notes for those who will watch this later on the channels. If you want to get in touch with us, simply via the website or send email to insights@wittigonia.net, and we will be happy to help you and create your tomorrow today. And with that, I'm wishing you good luck, and I'm looking forward to your feedback. And again, play more. Good luck.